Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Greggy,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is. Welcome to episode
Number 29.
number 29.
So grateful to have you here.
Yes. So I have got to say, we were a little bit tired last time we recorded our podcast. I went back and listened to it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're dragging. I thought it was good and good contact, but man, we could really see the impact that the retreat had on us for sure.
It was one of those amazing experiences. And also like when you go to camp or something and you're like on a high and everything's amazing and you come home and you're just like exhausted.
Yeah.
And so we were a little
emotionally and physically strained. So hopefully we're coming at you with a little more energy. The thing is that it was such an amazing opportunity to be there, and we learned so many things. Like we said last time, there was things that Amy said and I was listening that I was like, wait a minute, you mean? And this is like the second time in a row that really has happened. So I really feel like we're learning so many new things and we're still able to say them in just a different way that catches even my attention. Where I've heard it several times before.
I think that's what's so awesome about engaging, re-engaging, and like the privilege that we have, that we get to keep talking, discussing, learning, reading from all different sources and from all different people, because we get to see the depth of these concepts in action in so many people.
Absolutely. We even mentioned that just sharing our story seems to make it lighter in ways, and that makes it less like traumatic to us. Now that changes the story, and it's just very healing, and it's very beautiful to be able to share this and be able to see it impact other people's lives. So we are truly blessed. There was another thing that happened during the retreat that blew my ever-living mind. And so I really want to take some time to talk about it. And in fact, we've been talking about it all week. So hopefully we have some good stuff to talk to you about.
And ironically, it's come up in a lot of my coachings too.
That's what you said. They keep coming up. So I find that interesting too.
There's themes that just naturally present themselves. And here you go.
The world saying this is what we should talk about today.
Yeah.
So we're going to do it. So we were in a coaching session together, coaching this couple, and we'd been in it for a while. I'd been in it for maybe 45 minutes, an hour, and then Amy joined me, and we're probably in for another half hour. And Amy said something that literally just made my head explode. So we talk a lot about fantasies. Fantasies come up all the time. And to be honest with you, we really did not understand them, and they've been a mystery for us too for a while. And how do we have these? And some of them are just downright crazy. And
or why do we not have them?
Yeah, that was you. Like you couldn't fantasize at all, and that's just.
And it was another way
scary a little bit.
Right. It was another way I was broken. You're like, what are your fantasies? And I'm like, I don't have any. Does that mean I'm broken?
Right. And so we've talked a lot about them. But Amy said it in a way that I had never heard it before and made so much sense. So, babe, you want to share that with us?
Yes, I would love to share this. First, I just want to say that I have been on a journey to understand fantasy for a while now, because I didn't have them, first of all.
And she might have found the Holy Grail.
And so I wondered, why didn't I have them? And what did that indicate, which I hope we get to talk about today, because I think that's really important too.
And I had lots of them. And what that
and you had so many. And in the face of yours, what was my, responsibility, or like, how could I understand you and belong to myself and to you in the context of your fantasies? And so that just led me on a lot of different journeys. One place that I can absolutely recommend going to is Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity. Excellent book just on understanding how to reconcile the domestic parts of married life, meaning all the things we do, paying bills, taking care of kids, and the erotic side of married life. And she talks a lot about this in her book, Mating in Captivity, and what it is we're actually seeking in eroticism and fantasy. And then I've been reading another book. There's 2 books just on women's fantasies that women have anonymously submitted. And again, just trying to understand, why do we have them? What are they actually telling us? What is their purpose? Different things like that. So I came into this coaching session and it was a question around fantasy. And what I've come to understand is that fantasies often take, and I'm speaking specifically of sexual fantasies often take our most vulnerable and weakest parts and create a metaphor or a scenario or a context where those are no longer a threat or where those are solved. And sometimes it can be so coded that it's difficult to see, but when you have just that little piece, it can help you decode some fantasies. For example, I was coaching with a husband, and early in their marriage, he and his wife were sitting with another couple, and somehow the topic of their sexuality came up, or their lovemaking. And the one couple was just proclaiming how great their lovemaking was and how well everything was going. And this gentleman was sitting there thinking, wow, I must really be failing because we are struggling.
So Esther Perel says, sexuality is the number one thing we lie about. So
Yeah.
men play it up and women play it down. So thinking about that, maybe this couple was actually not fully being honest. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No worries. And so he then developed a fantasy that often involved another couple. And it wasn't that he actually ever wanted to bring another couple into their bedroom. Not that at all. What fantasies present as a problem or are insecurities and a solution. And in fantasy, you're the author, you're in control, you're never harmed. And so in fantasy, if you can bring in another couple, AKA the biggest threat, or what caused you to feel so insecure, you are now in a position and place of control in the face of your biggest threat.
Yeah.
And so it helps solve that insecurity in this fantasy. And I think that can be confusing to so many people. And I've coached many people. Maybe we'll get to some of those today. But just in understanding that so often what happens in our sexual fantasies, and maybe we'll delineate that between normal dreams, fantasies, desires, is really about decoding some of those deep insecurities and understanding that we don't actually want them in real life. They're like a metaphor or a really creative way to present this insecurity and the solution for it.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It still doesn't make sense, a lot of sense of sometimes what our fantasies are, but just shining that light, like you said, into this individual coaching, it took so much pressure off him. He thought, I'm a deviant. There's something wrong with me. Why would I keep thinking this? And as soon as he gave that to his mind, he was able to comprehend it, and that pressure was off. And no longer those voices telling him there's something wrong with you, wanting this all the time. Yeah. What is going on? Esther Perel talks about this. Like sometimes women's fantasies are really violent. They have fantasized about being coerced sexually and overtaken. And you're thinking, why in the world would that turn a woman on? Like, how could that ever be? And she says, if you think about what the mind's doing, it is not only the person putting you in that play, but it's telling that person that's controlling you everything you want. So literally you're getting everything with you want without having to be in control.
Without having to ask
for it. Like, and so you're trying to resolve this. It talked about how for years and years and years, women couldn't have sexual desire, right? Because it was taboo. It was bad. There was something wrong. And what a beautiful way the mind played this out. Here, this woman could not be in control and wouldn't have to take ownership of the desires that she really wanted to happen because someone else was forcing those on her. But yet, in reality, she was in control the whole time.
Right. And never actually being harmed.
Right. And never had causing pain or harm. Right.
Yes. And so sometimes there are those coercion type fantasies. And again, the person is never being harmed and they're actually being put in a place where maybe they would be fearful, but they're actually receiving everything that they would want without having to ask. And so in a fantasy, it helps to increase excitement and arousal when in reality, that wouldn't be the case because you aren't actually in control of everyone in the scenario.
It'd be painful and you wouldn't be in control. She also said, Esther Perel also said, like, you may have a fantasy to travel to Paris.
Yes.
And if you have that fantasy to travel to Paris, you're going to do everything to get yourself to Paris.
You actually want to be in Paris. You want to be there.
But with these sexual fantasies, you're not trying to actually act them out and play them. And I think we get stuck in that so much because we're like, wait a minute. I want this so badly, but when I go do this, it doesn't sit well with me morally. Mm-hmm. So how could that be? It was such a conflict. And she's like, yeah, those fantasies aren't the ones that you want to play in daylight. Jennifer Finlayson Five says most fantasies should not see the light of day. So it's not something that we have to truly act out, but it's something that can allow that excitement to happen. I know I have one that like gets me all fired up and I'm like all fantasize. And then when it comes down to doing it, it's like, I don't really want to do that. I'm like, I've had my fun. That doesn't sound so fun anymore. Literally in the act. Cause I was like, okay, Amy, I want to do this. And she's like, okay, not my thing. So she didn't ick my yum on my
yuck your yum.
Yuck my yum.
Ick your
Ick my Didn't yuck my yum. And she's like, okay. And then it came time, I'm like, oh, just kidding. It sounds so erotic and exciting and it got me all fired up. But in the moment of time, it was like, yeah, no, I'm not so into it anymore.
And that's really what fantasies do. They transcend some of our restrictions in life or some of the confines around us because eroticism, remember, is free. And so this is fantasy is a place you can be in your mind that can be free, where your insecurities no longer bind you and you're free. But that doesn't mean you actually want the context of the fantasy or the situation of the fantasy in real life. Another one I see a lot in coaching is the fantasy of a threesome. And a threesome often represents having a threat, because if you actually had a third person, then you would be threatened in your relationship about, now I have to be enough or compete or am compared to this other person. And that's what most people would find the most threatening thing to a relationship. And so a threesome represents bringing in that threat. But again, remember, in fantasy, you're in control. You're actually writing it. They aren't actually a threat. And so you are presenting the problem of a threat and the solution where they aren't a threat. And you're actually in control. So this is where fantasies take on that dream-like quality where things can work in your mind in a dream, but then when you wake up, you're like, wait, what? That could actually never happen in reality. But in the midst of an erotic mind, they can allow your mind to transcend and open up in ways that help for arousal and experience.
I think we really struggle with them because it does go against our moral fibers at sometimes, right? And we can't resolve that part of it because we're like, morally, I don't want to have another person in our bed with us and share that outside of it. That doesn't sound right. So why would my mind go there? Again, I think in times we try to control that so much that we probably cause some damage or some hard ache for our own sexuality because we've tried to control it when instead of allowing our mind to be free and go through these things, because we know, again, it's our mind trying to put context around it and put us in control and help us show ourselves our most vulnerable spots where we can't say it out loud. We can't express it. We don't even sometimes know it's there, but it's so vulnerable. We can't get there, but yet now it's allowing it to happen. And so
there's some healing in that, I think. Yeah. There's some acceptance and healing, knowing that you don't actually want the thing, but this fantasy allows you to feel secure in an insecurity or in control in an uncontrollable place.
Right. But we push them so far away and like, we can't touch that. If we think about it, then we're going to go do it.
Yeah.
I think my example before is probably the most shocking example for me, right? Because all the other fantasies, some we get to play out because they're not that way, but all those other out there side of fantasies that go against kind of what my moral fiber is, I've never got to a point where I'm like, okay, we're going to go and enact this, right? We're going to go do it because it's so against my moral fiber, I won't go there. But the example I gave earlier, this one thing that I was like, this would be really cool to go do. And it wasn't truly against our moral fiber. You're like, okay. And then even then, it was such a stark show to me that the mind can play with that to get excitement and arousal. But in the moment of actually going to do it or wanting to do it, it may not be the thing you want to truly do.
Yeah. And I think that's how you can still be anchored in yourself and also be accepting of your fantasies, is to say, yes, this is a way my mind creates a context of freedom. And also, I know that I don't have to enact these things. Like, I still have a moral and I still have a self with integrity and morality. And so again, you have both sides of freedom and morality at play.
And when you say that, it brings back the memory of talking to Jennifer about this. And she talks about how eroticism never wants to be told what to do.
Never.
It totally grows and is fed off of freedom. Mm-hmm. And that explains why the erotic mind does not want boundaries or boxes around it.
That's why it's always like transcending things that you wouldn't want in life. For example, some people have fantasies around things like wearing diapers or wetting a bed, and they don't actually want that in real life. What they might represent is a time when they were most loved or when they were absolutely free, that they could do something that is against all moral or cultural guide that is so taboo, and yet they're free. And so I think it's recognizing what the mind is doing, understanding that it's creating freedom in the mind, but you also still have your moral self that can anchor that freedom.
Yeah. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes the question has to be asked. I know for me, Amy finally asked me about one of them and said, could it be this is what your mind's trying to tell you? And when we were able to do that, I was like, maybe that is what it is trying to tell me and trying to give me that insight of why I'm thinking that. And it really does take that almost outside perspective to ask the question. Yeah. I think you can ask yourself the question, but it really does take an outside perspective to not be judgmental, but sit in the space of openness and say, what could the possibly be that your mind's trying to expose to you at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one more example of fantasy. A lot of times people in their mind might fantasize about being public or being seen with things that are very private, and perhaps they're a very private person. And it doesn't mean they actually want to be in public or to expose themselves. It means that they are free from that fear. And so I think as you start to understand what a fantasy might be offering you, then you don't have to feel shame.
Right.
And you can say, for example, if there were a fantasy around being public and I was a private person, I can create that freedom with my spouse, but that doesn't have to involve going outside of ways that are immoral for us. You can create ideas or settings or contexts within the privacy of your bedroom that create the freedom that the fantasy is inviting you in.
I think first and foremost is we got to get rid of the shame.
Yeah.
We got to stop trying to push these away and get rid of them. And get rid of the worry that, like, if we think about it, we're going to enact it. We were taught about that. You have to have a clean, pure mind. And if you think about this, you're down a slippery slope. And next thing you'll be committing adultery and all going to hell.
I actually think as you try and resist it and shame it, that's
it's like
when
the feeling is pushing down the beach ball.
Yeah, that's when it actually starts to be more problematic, and people struggle more moving through it and recognizing, oh, this fantasy is presenting me a theme or an idea or something that is allowing some sense of freedom, instead of, if they can't see that, then they get more stuck.
And let me say a couple things because it's brought up to my mind. Also, one thing, there is certain instances when you've had trauma.
Yes.
And these trauma, your mind is trying to wrap around it and can engage in this in a way that's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. So we want to put that out there. And Esther Perel talked about when that's the only way you can find yourself being aroused or getting aroused, that if you take away this fantasy and there's no possibility of arousal, that may be a signal that this was from some kind of trauma that needs to be worked through, and that we need to look a little different. So I don't want to set out there and say, hey, everything is great, just go, if all your fantasies are doing that. There is some intricacies here that would cause us to go, we probably need to work on something.
If there was only one avenue, and if you were so rigid in this one framing, that's probably an indication of more trauma linked to that fantasy, and there needs to be some healing work done around the trauma so that you can actually flourish more in your sexuality and eroticism.
I think this is fascinating because I keep coming back this full circle. There's something about the pattern that we teach around emotions and understanding them and the way that the brain works and having to work through them and acknowledge them, or these emotions get buried and continue to not be benign. As Brene Brown said, if you don't work on them, they're not benign. So they come out sideways as we talk about them. And I still see this pattern. I haven't completely connected everything together. And I can't wait till the day that I do, because I will share it with everybody here. But there is this pattern that I keep seeing over and over again, where you look at emotions and you look how we deal with those. And if you don't deal with them, they come out sideways. Our desires and sexual desires, I think, are the same way. We have these desires and wants. If we take these sexual desires and we do the same thing, we do not process through them and we try to bury them, are not benign either. They come out sideways and they look wrong. And we're like, oh, we don't respect the way that it happened. So there's a pattern there. And I just heard that pattern again. I heard that pattern with sexual fantasies. We say, if we have these sexual fantasies and we try to dismiss them, we're ashamed about them, we push them down, then either they're going to show up somewhere else sideways, or either they're going to be something that we get stuck on, like we can't get over with, and we put too much emphasis onto them. They'll come out in a way we don't respect them either.
Yeah.
And so in all this is what we're saying is, don't push these down and dismiss them. Think about potentially, what is it meaning to you? Being able to speak with your spouse about them is really important too.
But not in a way that your spouse has to fulfill their... This is never about work or performance.
Because we know where that goes.
Yeah.
And not even, I don't think, if you're not talking about sex in general, you probably shouldn't start with your fantasy. That's not going to work.
The highest level.
Kind of the level you want to get to after
you don't even have a pilot light going yet, maybe don't
You
start.
don't want to light it because it's going to explode instead of make the flame go.
Yeah.
But being able to, if you're to a place where you can comfortable in talking about it, you guys are working through your sexuality together, you own yours, she owns hers, and that stuff's working, bringing these to the light of day and having conversations about them can be very healing, can be very erotic, and it can cause you to be very close. I know when I finally started exposing myself and sharing these with Amy, they was the scariest thing that I ever did. Because I kept waiting for the point, because you remember, I've been told all these years that I'm a deviant. You've been told all these years my sexuality is going to hurt somebody, that there's something wrong with me, that I'm broken. And that's what I've been told all the time. I tell the story about when I finally figured out it wasn't, as I'm just sobbing on the airplane because I realized that I'm not a deviant. That's without me telling everybody or anybody, not everybody, I'm not going to tell everybody, but anybody about what's actually going on in my mind. And I keep thinking, okay, this is going to be it. I'm going to tell this Amy, and she thinks I'm going to be the most wackiest person. She can't stand with me, and she's going to go, that's enough. I don't want it anymore. And it's going to close down and start over. But to give credit where credit's due, man, you really stayed open. And that doesn't mean you think, oh, that's the greatest fantasy in the world, and I want to try all that out. But you've been willing to allow me to share that, and it's caused us to truly trust and get close together. In those moments where you expose those things that doesn't even make sense to you, that maybe make you think that there's something wrong with you, you expose that to your spouse, and they're willing to listen and hear you out and love you, even though they may not understand you. That's true compassion. That's true choosing. That's true eroticism in the way of building this relationship together that allows you to share in it. So again, if you're not in a good place and you're working to get there, let's wait to get to this place. But if you have,
but maybe this will offer you some self-acceptance of your own.
And if you can start working through those other things, you'll get to a point
inner erotic world
where you can actually share them. And it really has brought us closer together, being able to be open and sharing. Now let's flip the coin.
I was just going to say,
right?
what about if
Because
you don't have fantasies?
on the other side of this coin, where I expose myself to Amy with these fantasies, she's been thinking she's broken this whole time because she couldn't, for the life of her, even if I read her a good one, think about another one the next day. Like, it was such a foreign concept to you to even have them.
I had fantasies about a clean house.
Oh, that's sexy, baby. I'm getting aroused right now thinking about it.
I had fantasies about relaxing days with no requirements.
That's so true. So that, before we go there, I think Esther Perel talked about this a little bit, and she said something that's so fascinating. She's like, I've asked this question to women, and it's a very interesting question.
Oh, I was going to go there. You're jumping too fast. Hold on to that. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on to that. We're going to get there. So I do believe that I had fantasies, but because they didn't come in the frame of yours, and as I have studied fantasy, I have realized there are fantasies that are like very plotted or set up in very certain situations or circumstances. There are fantasies around themes. And then there are fantasies about just the way you want to experience a sexual encounter, or the fantasies about the way you want to feel in a sexual encounter. And when I started to recognize that, I was like, oh, I have those. I want to feel cherished. I want to feel free. I want to feel connected. I want to feel this deep choosing. And I saw that in the fantasies of these anonymous women too. They really wanted to be known so deeply and to be ravished or spoiled or like thoroughly, what's the word?
Cherished.
They wanted to be thoroughly cherished. Some of them even mentioned the word worshipped. And it was the first time I encountered that word, like, and I don't mean to be
sacrilegious.
I don't mean to be sacrilegious, but it was just adoration, pure adoration. And I thought, oh, okay. Like, I don't want that in my regular life, but yes, I want to be fully adored. And it's interesting because recognizing that helped me recognize the second part of that. And the second part of that is that I couldn't actually feel cherished or adored or ravished or any of those things until I actually was capable of receiving that and capable of feeling that I was worthy of that, or I don't know, not worthy, capable of feeling, capable of being able to receive that, capable of liking myself first. And so it's an interesting process because I think sometimes we only have this one idea of fantasy as being only sexual, but it can be, you want to feel this way with someone, you want to be able to receive something from your spouse, you want to be able to be so free that you're not doing any type of work in that setting. And that's also fantasy.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. So Esther said she's never had a woman sitting in her office when she asked this question answer in any other way but to the affirmative of wanting to be treasured and wanting to be loved.
And wanting to be the turn on.
Yeah. And the question that she asked them is, how do you turn yourself on? And she says she asked in that specific way, it wasn't what turned you on. How does someone else turn you on? What are the things that turn you on? How are the toys or other stuff that you need to be turned on? It was none of that. It was literally, how do you turn yourself on? And she said, and women never, ever go to the sexual side.
No, it's like, I felt really beautiful in the way that I got dressed, or
I went to the walk in nature and that really got me.
And it inspired me, or I saw this interaction between my husband and my children and it warmed my heart and it just melted me. It made me feel so safe and so abundant or so blessed in our family. And so often women who are often the responsive or lower desire, as they're entering into this realm of a sexual encounter or into the realm of engaging with their own sexuality, it's not sexual to start with. It's very much, are you okay to be in your body? Are you okay to feel pleasure in any way. It could be a great walk with a friend. It could be a delicious meal. It could be rest and relaxation, an amazing book. It could be some sweet, tender moment with your child that like opens up your capacity to receive pleasure in some way.
I love the story you tell about one of the people you were coaching, where you were asking them what they desire, what they wanted, what they're happy. And the only thing they could think of was the color green.
Mm-hmm.
Period green. And I'd heard that story before and I thought it was really cool. But you told the rest of the story before. And I was like, oh, wow. You want to tell the rest of the story?
You want me to tell the rest of the story? So I was coaching with this gal and trying to help her find herself again, because that is often what happens in the process of life. In some way, we lose ourselves under the obligations and responsibilities of life. And that is what had happened. And so a way to find a way back to yourself is to listen to your desires, what it is you really want to create, or what's calling to you, or what you want to learn, or what just brings you some joy and delight. And so I asked her to notice and to listen to her desires, what it was she was desiring, anything at all. And she came back and said, I noticed the color green. I said, okay, let's start with green.
We can work with green.
We can work with green. And I said, just notice how you feel when you're wearing green, or when you see green, or anything around you that brings out this green to you. So she did. She noticed green clothing things that she loved and brought those in. She noticed as she was driving home, different spots on the drive that just had pretty greenery or different things like that. And so that just started to wake her up, and she was enjoying the greenery. So she decided to go for some walks. And on her walks, she started to feel a little better, and she was noticing just all the amazing green foliage and flora and fauna and just plants everywhere, and brought a few of those into her home, and just kept allowing this green really to feel her, like allowed her to receive some goodness and delight and pleasure, whether it was adding green things into her home or her wardrobe or on her walks, and just generally started to feel a little bit better about herself. Ended up going on vacation where there was really green, really gorgeous, and had rented some e-bikes and really enjoyed that. So her and her husband got some e-bikes, and they've been riding trails all over and just exploring, and it's brought so much like joy and life and vibrancy to them. And
the change between both of them is unbelievable to see. Like, it is 180 degrees.
Yeah. And it was just from the color.
It started green.
So I think sometimes we underestimate the ways and the things that open us up. And so if you are someone who's thinking, I don't have sexual fantasies, that's okay.
Yeah, if they're not elaborate and they have all these details, because probably your partner is, knowing how we match up against each other, and you're thinking that you're broken, it doesn't mean that. Also,
something else really important to address is women inherently, their form is inherent symbol of eroticism. So they inherently are this symbol, just their female form, no matter what form it is in, women. So please stop criticizing yourself. They are inherently the turn on. And our male counterparts, our husbands, really like when women are the turn on, when their wives allow themselves to be the turn on and allow themselves to be aroused. But I don't know of a single woman or a wife that I've ever coached that feels the same about her husband's arousal or erection.
No, nope. In fact, Esther talked about how a man could be standing there with a great erection next to her and it would do nothing for the woman because she's focused on what it means to her. And that's important for us male folks that are pretty offended by that when we first heard that. So we see it through our lenses. We're like, oh my gosh, my wife just blows my mind. She's so attractive and she turns me on. And man, sometimes it's all I can do during the day not to go and touch her and stuff. It's just mind blowing. And so we equate that to, if she saw that the same way in me, that means that she would choose me and want me. But it's not that way. The woman actually, this is the only time, and really in her nature, that she's allowed to be almost narcissistic
In
the
very,
best way.
very best
In the
sense.
very best way, not in the bad way. But the way that the sexual realm happens is that she can go in and receive and be spoiled and taken care of, and know that she's the one that's causing her spouse to be aroused. And that blows her mind. And without us knowing this, it really does put a divide between us, because again, it makes us try to make them look like me. I wanted Amy to have the same fantasies as me. I wanted her to be turned on when she saw me, like I'm turned on when I see her. And it's not possible, because that's not the way she's built. And instead of it meaning that she's broken and she doesn't choose me and desire me, understanding the way that she does work, and understanding the way that if I talk about this a lot, get the hell out of the way and allow her to grow into this space and own her own sexuality. There's way more out there that allows us to connect and be loved and feel chosen than when we try to put it in the small little box of our own understanding. It's the curiosity. Be curious enough to try to understand what this looks like from your partner or spouse. You're not being selfish in this sexual realm when you think to yourself, I wonder if this was pleasurable to my spouse. I wonder if she would say this was something that was enjoyable to her, and enjoy it. It's something you can always ask yourself to make sure that you're in the right space, and then try to take this moment to see it in their eyes and understand how their sexuality works. Not because you want to change it, not because it has to be like you. That's where eroticism, that's where desire is born and bred, is in that gaps and differences. We spend so much time trying to get rid of it. And what we're trying to get rid of, we're actually getting rid of the thing we want the most, and that eros and that being chosen. We kill it because we try to make it the same.
Yes. And I think for those women, I'm speaking for responsive desire women, again, your fantasies may look very different. They may look like being cherished, being chosen, being spoiled, having freedom, feeling loved, creating connection. That's a very legitimate fantasy. And that fantasy, maybe combined with your husband's, is a great place to collaborate and a great room. And it's okay to take the time to focus on yourself, to ask your husband to slow down, to help him pace with you. Both spouses benefit by slowing down and savoring and simmering and allowing, because one of the greatest parts of actual intimacy is the anticipation and the arousal. And that is where so much of eroticism lives, is right there. And so rather than rushing, rather than making it about performance, rather than making it about getting to an end goal, slow down, simmer. A lot of responsive desire fantasies are about that simmering and that savoring and that stretching out that anticipation. You can also help yourself in that by really allowing yourself to focus inwardly on what's happening in yourself and your body that's connecting you with your pleasure, with your arousal. And eventually, as pleasure and arousal are there long enough, then desire will start to present. And that is completely normal.
Let me throw you a curveball.
Yes, please. Oh, I love curveballs.
How did you go about allowing yourself to engage me in my fantasies when that wasn't necessarily the thing that turned you on? Because you got to a point where I, first of all, couldn't share them, but even when I could share them, it was like, okay, we're not going to touch that. But you've gotten to a point where you can play in that realm of something that didn't really seem to be turning you on at first. And you allowed that to happen. And when it happens, it grows both of us, and it's allowed us to have expansiveness in our sexuality and in our eros. So how did you do that?
I really think that was from understanding, first of all, what fantasy was presenting. It was allowing there to be freedom and to be like limitless eros energy. And so even if the context of your fantasy isn't what I would choose, I can feel the eros in it. I can feel the aliveness in it. I can feel the freedom in it.
What went from that to, we talk about my past, when you found out I was partaking in pornography, I know there was a point in time where you're like, oh, he just wants to act out all the things that he's seen on the screen. And
that was a
is
huge
being
threat for a
using
long
with you.
time.
So that blocked you too. And even that, there's so many pieces that overcome. And maybe it really is truly, we can track the intent of our spouse, and when they're coming at us to share what they want and open their minds and help invite us into fantasies, that goes away. But there had to be some blockages there that had to be overcome before you could engage me where I was in my fantasies.
Yes. And I think a lot of that came from learning to cherish myself, because when I wasn't cherishing myself, everything else was a threat, whether it was pornography, whether it was fantasy, whether it was a TV show, whether it was a beautiful woman walking by, everything was a threat.
Beaches were hell.
Yes. Anything that involved swimsuits was a threat. And so lowering that threat level for me came about by actually recognizing that I was desirable and that I was worthy of being desired, and it was up to you to be smart or not to choose me.
Yeah.
And so that lowered the threat significantly. And then I think really learning to understand fantasy and what it was about. I learned before you started sharing your fantasies that so much of fantasy is not about actually doing the thing, and it's not about what the actual situation of a fantasy is, that it is about a vulnerability being expressed. And I could see the vulnerabilities in your fantasies, and I could see they tracked with what I know about.
Even before you knew that's what it was doing?
Yeah, I could track that's what you were sharing and bringing this really vulnerable self to me. And there was something very, like in that vulnerability, something connecting of it. Like you trusted me enough to bring that much exposure to me.
Yeah. Again, we talk about it. There's that physical thing that you may never want to do, but you can play a lot. You can play in those shadows together, and it's very exciting and erotic. Okay. I'll give a more specific example so we're not dancing around it, right? So if the fantasy is having a threesome or bringing other people into the room, you don't have to literally physically go there, but you can play in that, right? You can play in the imagination that we're inviting you, or that you are the one that I invited and my spouse is watching us do this, or my spouse could come home any moment now and see us, and what would they think? You can play in those areas together. And
if there's consent.
If there's consent and you're ready to go there. When you can play in those areas together, and when you decided this wasn't a threat, but it was something that allowed us to be open and vulnerable with it, when you started playing in those areas, it was very, very beneficial for both of us, I think.
And I think I also had to get rid of any sexual interactions as performance.
Yeah. Well, that's big on everything.
Yeah. When otherwise, had you shared these and
you were in an acting job and performing.
Right. Then it would have been more work, more expectations, more duty, more obligations. And so a lot of that, again, really has to be cleared up first. And the meanings of your engagement or choosing to be sexual and share these has to be very clearly about freedom and pleasure and not work or duty or obligation.
There's always work to be done on yourself. That's the number one thing we teach, right? You cannot control anyone else or anything else. The only thing you have control is yourself. And so really leaning into yourself and trying to understand where the things are coming from and working through your own mind and asking the questions are really, really important to get to a good place where you're able to expose your true self to your spouse. It only worked because I had done the work to myself to know that I didn't need the validation from you. And that if I was vulnerable and you were like, ugh, yuck, that I could be okay with myself, that it didn't mean I was a sexual deviant. It didn't mean there was something awful broken about me. It just meant that I like something you didn't like. There's certain foods that you eat, lemon meringue pie, you love it. It's like the only thing I won't eat, right? So it's like I hate it and I don't have to like it. But we can still share in that fact. And so it was me also doing the work along the side to be okay with myself, to love me and my own sexuality, to know my sexuality was something of good. It was a force that caused life, literally and figuratively, and could bring great blessings to me and those that I loved. That was a bumpy journey. I spent a lot of time of my life, the majority of my life, thinking the opposite of that. And it took a lot of hard work to change that mindset.
I'm really thinking too of your question. I'm still answering it in my mind. And I think Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, also opened up my mind to recognize that there were two really like different intelligences to bring to marriage. And I hadn't developed a neurotic intelligence yet, or I hadn't developed a erotic side. I was really good at parenting and cleaning and structure and bills and like being a good confidant and making great friendships and like all of those structural type things. I was really good at all of those, but I hadn't delved into the desire and passion and eroticism. And so I think her book showed me why it was so necessary that the eroticism is what fuels the relationship. It's a place where you live without bounds that is free. And from that eroticism, that aliveness, that vibrancy, that energy, then you take that as a couple into your domestic duties and responsibilities, which are demanding and are consuming and are very worthwhile and very wonderful. I'm not saying anything wrong about them. And then you take that companionship you've developed in the structure and you bring it over to the sexual, where you know you are safe and can play in these imaginative contexts. And again, refuel. So like they're like the perfect yin and yang, where yes, you're creating through work on the domestic side, and you're also creating and fueling passion and aliveness that is for the relationship, so it doesn't feel dead and empty.
I wish I could show everyone the perfect image I found of the yin and yang. It was like passion rolled up in a picture with a yin and yang in the middle of it. Remember, for our slide deck?
Maybe you should use that for
maybe that will be the
cover art.
Cover of art. I found it right there, but it truly did show that expression of having the yin and yang and how that fed into this passion. Again, very important that that's the case. Is this is something you do together in an open way, but also that you work on yourself and you don't try to drag your spouse into it. If you try to coerce them into doing
that is
fantasies,
not okay.
This is going to be disastrous. It's going to be awful for you. So please don't do that. We would love to take a moment to help you walk through this. Again, it took someone else looking at me. And I guess Amy just told me today, and she never told me before. So these things get exposed on the podcast, which is great, that she could read these intentions and what my vulnerabilities was before she even realized that's what the brain was doing. And so when she came across this information of that, what brain was doing, it was kind of like the aha moment of, oh, that's why this means that for Greg. But she could see it and she could understand that. And so it really does take someone else to be able to ask those questions and put you in the mind space to help you think about them differently. And we would love to do that. We've seen it bless other people's life. Amy gave you the example of the person she was coaching before. It really was a turning point for him because he had taken so much into his soul about how bad it was and he couldn't justify it and come up with it. And it was a relief to him and he was able to move forward. And so we would love to meet with you and have a chat about this. Please visit us on our website
at langfordlifecoaching.com.
There's a little button in the corner of every page.
Hint, hint.
It says free consult. Please sign up for that. We would love to have you. We love doing this. I know you're going to get tired of me saying this. Maybe this is the point where they turn it off and don't listen to it.
Yeah, they're like, okay, blah,
here
blah,
goes
blah.
Greg's wrote. But it's not written down. It's not wrote. It's true passion. I wish I could tell you how passionate it is and show you.
I feel your passion, babe.
I know you always do. She's burning up over here. From my deepest spot of my heart, this truly is a great blessing to us. And we've enjoyed every minute of it. And we thank you. I might be a little addicted to watching the numbers of the podcast.
Yeah, I think you are.
That's the way I do things.
I don't even know where the numbers are.
That's the way I roll. But thank you so much. Please subscribe, tell your friends, leave comments, email us, whatever we can do to engage. We would love it.
Yes, I'm actually going to make a request that I didn't tell you about, babe.
We're learning new things
That's
already. Surprise, surprise.
I would love for any and all of you listeners to send in a situation or a scenario that you would like us to talk about. Somewhere that you maybe feel stuck and say, hey, here's what's going on. Can each of you speak to this from each side of this equation and
That'd be
offer
fun.
some little advice? I feel like that's maybe safer than sharing coaching stories. I try and do them very safely so that no one ever knows that there's a story being shared about them. But in this case,
I don't think they mind if it's them. It's just don't other people know it's them. Like we've had people call us. I'm like, that was it. I made the podcast. I made the podcast. So
that's happened too.
I'm not so worried about that part. We want to keep them generic enough that we don't expose any of the privacy around them. But having those would be great. I think that, we won't, the expectation has to be there without someone on the other side, you're not going to be able to dig into certain things.
Right,
so it'll be more just our color commentary about the situation, but it could be fun.
Yeah. So if you feel so inclined, email us at Amy@Langford Life Coaching or Greg at Langford Life Coaching and send us the scenario or situation or conflict or struggle that you feel like you're having that you would love to hear us talk through.
That'd be awesome.
So awesome.
All right. Thank you so much. Until next time.
Keep undressing your intimacy.
Bye-bye.